calling to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll start out with the treasurer report. Rich, whenever you're ready.
Yes. This is our fifth month. It represents 42% of our fiscal year. And we received about 48% of our operating revenue and spent approximately 38% of our budgeted operating expenditures. You would have noted probably that in November, we get another tranche of the state tax disbursements, which we got. And based on their calculations, we should get about 3.688 million this year. And we budgeted 3.65. So we'll get about, what is that, $48,000 more than we budgeted. So good shape there. There's nothing in the report itself that's outstanding. So that's the report.
Thank you. Any questions at all?
No.
All right.
Great to know that in November we find out we're good for the rest of the year.
Great to know. Yeah, we're good for the rest of the year. Wonderful. Thank you. We'll transition over to Todd whenever you're ready for the manager's report.
You're on mute, Todd. You're on mute.
Thanks. Sorry. I'll review some of the staff initiatives undertaken over the last month. Some of the key initiatives staff has undertaken include the Bethesda Market Park development, tracking the county's multifamily housing proposals, and addressing proposed clarifications to state law concerning municipal regulatory authority. We have also engaged in reviewing and submitting testimony for Mayor Lane's December 9th testimony in front of the Montgomery County State Delegation regarding the issue of proposed clarifications to state law, as well as the December 2nd testimony she gave in front of the Planning Department regarding the board, regarding the Bethesda Downtown Plan Minor Master Plan Amendment. Staff has met with Corso officials also to discuss an initial draft of a ground lease and development agreement. We've agreed to go back to the drawing board on that since the initial agreement that they provided didn't suit our needs, and they acknowledged that, and they will regroup to provide another agreement for our review. Staff organized and attended a council work session on privacy screening improvements along the Capitol Crescent Trail adjacent to the town. And if anyone listening or anyone who hears the recording wants to know the outcome of that, the council decided not to pursue any screening on the fencing and barriers adjacent to the purple line along the Capitol Crescent Trail at this time, given the exorbitant cost and the fact that the engineering firm would not agree to scale the design and engineering costs according to project scope. So for the time being, we've decided to pursue a vegetative screening option in the backyards of residents who live along the alignment, offering faster growing evergreens for planting to provide an effective screen, hopefully by the time the purple line becomes operational, and the council has agreed to revisit this issue at that time to determine whether anything else needs to be done. The staff evaluated and discussed Pepco's streetlight program and LED lighting proposals. And I know John Lloyd is working with Barney and Rich on that issue. We have researched EV charging and sidewalk obstructions issues, which will be discussed later this evening. We've continued our overgrown vegetation enforcement program. And if you'd like an update on that, John Lloyd is in attendance tonight that he can provide an update. We've communicated with SHA about overgrown vegetation along Bradley. We've been doing it for months and we can't get any traction here. We're hoping something will be done soon. We just don't know exactly when. We've continued some room and park renovations. We're done with the grading and concrete pour for the new walkway. The flagstone and furnishings should start next week, delayed a bit due to the inclement weather. That'll take about another 3 weeks to complete. So we're looking at an estimated completion date in there about mid-January. We'll determine when to schedule a site visit to address potential fencing and installation of fencing, probably very early in the spring and March at some point, I would believe. We've prepared for the East and Leland intersection improvements. So it was supposed to actually start this week, but it was too rainy. And so we're anticipating a start date of next week. We've continued coordination with MCDOT, the county's Department of Transportation, on some drainage improvements along Leland Street, which they're paying for. We're covering the costs of engineering and permitting. And we filed for a variance with WSSC for that work, and that's currently under review. God knows how long that'll take, given our past experience. And so that is in process. The town's applied for our 2026 State Aid for Police Protection Grant. We've completed the fall tree planting, continued to provide project support to town committees, and that concludes the staff report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Todd? Please.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the report. On Corso, the agreement is for the construction agreement, just to make clear?
No.
No, it's not, and not a temporary, not a construction management agreement. The ground lease and development agreement is for the temporary garage and permanent garage.
Okay. And where do they plan to put it?
They're not getting a construction management agreement probably until around March, and they're going to provide us with a copy of what they're providing to the county along with all their other permitting documents. And so we'll be able to review the construction and management agreement that they're proposing to the county simultaneous to the county review. And we'll be able to add conditions and other qualifications on that document and probably likely included as an addendum to the county's construction management agreement.
Okay. Or generally, that sounds fine, by the way. I like the idea of our piggybacking on a basic agreement they'd have with the county. It makes it sound like less work for us. Do you have any indication of a time frame for when they think they'll be able to finish pulling permits and start construction?
Well, they're going to apply for permits in March. I would expect it would take better part of a year. So
they haven't applied yet for permits?
No.
Wow.
No, they're going through stormwater management. They're preparing their permitting documents, but they have not applied for building permits yet. They're anticipating March to do that. So once building permits are submitted, I'm certain that's going to go through quite a rigorous review process, both at the county level and to some extent.
So that means construction probably won't begin until 2026.
Right.
Late
All right.
2025, early 2026 is my guess, yes.
For demolition, that is.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Okay,
And we haven't been.
That's good to know. I had thought that they had started. Obviously, they couldn't submit the permits immediately, but I hadn't realized it would be this large a time frame between the being awarded, having the site plan approved, and when they would actually be able to file permits. That surprises me that it takes that long, but we're learning.
They've been going through, from what I understand, they've been going through some value engineering for the project, assumedly because it's extremely expensive, and they're looking to cut costs in some areas. They haven't completed stormwater management review yet. So all of this is sort of pending building permit submission once they determine after their value engineering exercise and once stormwater management is resolved. I believe they're intending to submit for permits in March.
Okay. And then for the temporary garage, where are they proposing for that?
It's a pad site on the property. I believe it's to the left of the entrance once you enter the property. It'll be probably co-located with their management facility. The trailer is their on-site management facility. We've reviewed plans for that building and the specifications, and we're fine with it on a temporary basis, but they're going to locate it to the left of the entrance as you enter the property.
But it'll be covered or just a pad?
I know it's on a pad site. Sorry, it's a concrete pad. It's going to be a covered 20 by, I believe it's 20 by 10 structure. So it'll be covered. It'll provide 2 bays and everything that we need for on a temporary basis to store our equipment.
Okay. Good. I had one other question about Zimmerman, if I might. The path, and I think some of us had a chance to walk, and we really like the path that has been created there. That's really lovely. That'll be really nice. How far along do the flagstones go? Just to the curb cut or all the way out to east-west?
I believe we're taking them all the way to east-west.
We are, okay.
Let me check with Dave on that, but I'm almost certain that's the case, but I'll follow up tomorrow.
That's what I thought that was probably the case. I just didn't see the stones out that far, so I was curious. Okay.
I'm sure that that's the case. It would look awfully odd otherwise.
John's just answered here, so. Okay.
I'll check on that and I'll verify that tomorrow with you.
Can't hear you, so.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
No, because John is also answering. I was just commenting to John, and you don't know that John is answering, so that's.
I gotcha. Okay, sorry.
No. Any other questions for Todd? I really appreciate the tree planting. I've been seeing the truck all over town, dropping stuff off. For the vegetation clearance, sidewalk clearance thing, I assume it's in hiatus at the moment. It'll be picked up.
No, we're starting on.
Sorry. Just so everyone can hear you.
Take the mic back here.
Yeah, you might want to take the mic. That's true.
Zone 1 is done. We're starting in the west and the northwest section we declared as Zone 1. That's been completed. Most notably, the U's that were along 46th that were encroaching seriously on the sidewalk have all been pushed back. And I'm sure the residents are delighted. I look at people when they walk down it every time just to see if they're doing this. We've moved on. Letters for Zone 2 have gone out. That's the general letter. And we're about 2 weeks away from sending out the targeted letter.
Okay.
So we had about 10 targets in Zone 1, households that had some remediation to do. Todd probably told you at the last meeting, we saw evidence that the general letter did enable people to do some pruning. So it seems to be working well, but there will be chances someone might get upset depending on how things
But
unfold.
so far, yeah.
But we're on the second zone and I'm going to keep going throughout the winter.
And it'll be 5 zones.
I don't remember the count. It's something like that.
Okay. Thank you. For the Leland and East construction, assuming it is able to start next week, when would it be completed by?
I don't know how long it'll take for mobilization and ultimate completion. I'll have to ask Dave and follow up with you.
Okay.
I think it's fairly quick, but I don't know either.
So
Yeah, it's
a couple
pretty
weeks
fast.
or a month, couple
Couple
months?
weeks.
Couple weeks.
Couple weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They don't want to open it up and have water be a
Right.
factor in a complication. So that's the reason they delayed. They're looking for a 4 or 5 day stretch of clear weather. Temperature could come into play.
Yeah.
It could, yeah. Not with concrete normally, but asphalt definitely. So we're looking to expedite. So we're talking just a couple weeks, not anywhere near a couple months. It'll get too cold.
Yeah.
And I frankly, I'm surprised the asphalt plants haven't closed yet. Something I need to discuss with Dave tomorrow about timing for this and whether or not we're going to get caught with our.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking that, Todd, where I don't want it open and then we find out we got stuck in an ice storm and then it's just out there as an open pit. Rather not even start it at all if that's the case. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
to look ahead to ask our local weatherman to see if we do have 2 weeks clearance. There you go. Okay, thank you for that. I don't know if there's any public comments because I can't tell if there are people on the line, but not having their video on.
There's no one on the line.
Okay, thank you. So public comments, we'll move on. So we'll go on to the council discussions. This first discussion relates to discussing the amending Chapter 4 for buildings. There's a lot of updates of definitions, just to clean up, hadn't been looked at in a while. And then there was an additional change and it comes up nicely with our recent, just a few minutes ago, talking about the sidewalk vegetation clearance. When you received the print, I'm sorry, the report, it showed that kind of old language about, I think it was section 452, if I'm not mistaken. And Ron, you can let me know if it's 452.
Yeah.
Yes, 452, about structures and shrubbery and other plant growth on private property. There was the language in there, was like that old language where we had that 7-foot clearance. And so the latest version that Ron provided has the updated like language, because we're ADA compliance kind of, so it just follows in line. But now we can discuss the rest of it. And Ron, I don't know if you had any other things that you wanted to bring up about that.
No, that was perfect. So, the Land Use Committee submitted their report in February. We amended the town code in October to simplify our overgrowth vegetation standards. So when I drafted the first version given to you, it didn't include the October amendments. So now I've revised it to make sure we're not amending a provision we've already amended. So if there is a motion to introduce tonight, it would be to introduce the ordinance as you've seen it with the amendment that the mayor just described.
Right. And I did, Barney brought up something to me that we had not talked about when we were discussing it, that we didn't have a work session on it, did we? No, we just talked about it at the last council meeting. We added, in that 452, we added, there was an addition that wasn't in the previous ordinance, which is about alleys.
Yes, and that's in there.
Yeah, and that's in there. And the concern was that the alleys were difficult to plow and for the garbage trucks to get through, and needed clearance to do that. And so that was added to make sure there's enough clearance in those alleyways for plowing and for garbage collection.
Great.
Yep.
Any questions, discussions? Happy to hear a motion to introduce this for public hearing.
I'll make a motion to introduce it to public hearing. I think it's very good work, good job, and good set of clarifications. So thank you, Rich, and thank for the committee for all that good work. And you too, Ron, because you always do this.
Yeah.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Second. Great, enjoy. Seconds the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. So we will introduce it for our January meeting, public hearing, and make a decision at that point. The next discussion point is around electric vehicle charging regulations, street and sidewalk obstruction. So if you'll permit me, I'll give a slight little history to this. I guess in the last month, maybe 6 weeks, there's been a few instances around town where people it's unclear whether it is vehicles that are owned by the resident or leased by the resident, or visitors to that particular resident, but essentially long cords were being utilized to charge the vehicle when it was on street charging, and it was going across the sidewalk. I personally witnessed a situation on Meadow where just walking along, it was during the day at least, and it was being charged in the street, and people had put in 2 construction barrels, and it just went across. And you know how Meadow has a long right of way, just went across the whole thing. So it was absolutely an issue. If someone had been riding a bicycle, or young kid or whatever may have missed it. And that's occurring throughout the town in certain instances. So that's what initially led us to kind of think about, let's take a look at our current ordinance about this. There's obviously a sidewalk clearance that's necessary just for public safety purposes, but what do we do with the advent of electric vehicles? Then most recently, there was a resident who wrote us and asked, what are the rules around this? Because My driveway is less than 10 feet wide, and I can't physically get that vehicle up my driveway. And I don't know if I should purchase an EV because of it, right? So what are the rules around having a charging capability in light of the fact that I am not able to utilize my driveway for this instance? So the driveway happens to be about 9 feet, and just to give you a little more information. So the staff has come in, and I'll let Todd take over as well. That's like the background of information. So staff has been coming in to talk about best practices and what they've learned around this, and what are the potential options out there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Todd.
Thanks, Irene. So since we developed this memo, there are some other there's been some additional information we've gathered from, in addition to what's in the memo, from the county's practices, Tacoma Park's practices, and DC's practices. We've also found out that the county doesn't allow any obstructions at all, cords over sidewalks, or even ADA compliant cord covers for such charging cords. And obviously, I think we should follow suit. There are a number of reasons why. They pose tripping hazards. Charging cable covers can cause themselves tripping hazards. They can be moved, relocated, dislodged. They can be covered with snow and ice during winter storms especially when we engage in our sidewalk snow removal program. So I think understanding what the county does and understanding what the concerns are, I think it's probably wisest for the council to, at the very, as a first step, to direct the town attorney and the town staff to work on an ordinance that explicitly addresses these charging cords that are across sidewalks and the cable and the attendant cable covers that some people are using, but not many. Secondarily, there is an issue of EV charging stations being located in town rights of way. And well, let me go back. Obviously, there are options the council can consider with respect to prohibiting or not prohibiting charging cords and attendant covers in town rights of way in all cases, which I would propose that you do for the reasons I cited. Of course, there are options. You can prohibit charging cords from passing over or under sidewalks. And if there's not a sidewalk, there may be aesthetic considerations. You could allow charging cords in the rights of way with conditions and a permit and license, a hold harmless agreement, if you will, only if there's no off-street charging option available, or you can allow charging cords in rights of way with simply conditions and a permit/license. But I would strongly encourage you to prohibit them in all instances because of the reasons I cited. Like I said, the memo has a little bit become overcome by events because of what we've learned from the county and what best practices there are. With respect to EV charging stations, we haven't necessarily had a request yet to install a charging station. The instance that Irene cited is one on Ridgewood, where someone was inquiring about our regulations in anticipation of purchasing an electric vehicle. I didn't indicate that they wanted a charging station specifically, but we anticipate getting such requests if we don't allow cords and cables across sidewalks as a matter of fact, simply because of the tripping hazards they pose. So we would anticipate likely by prohibiting such obstructions that some individuals may wish to request charging stations in the right of way, if and only if their properties cannot accommodate off-street charging, meaning they have a substandard width driveway, or there's no other location for them to charge other than on-street. Understanding this is probably a 1% solution because there aren't many people in town who have very substandard driveways or can't find any off-street parking space or facility to charge their vehicles. So I don't anticipate a proliferation of of requests for EV charging stations, but we may be faced with such requests by prohibiting cables across sidewalks.
Yeah.
The Montgomery County allows EV charging stations in rights of way under certain conditions. And the first is that there is no other alternative or option for off-street parking for the property, and certain other conditions are met. As I indicated, the county does not allow charging cables to be placed across sidewalks. I believe what occurs, and I'm not going to read from I can open the PDF and read it from it to you. They go through a multi-step process. There's an initial determination by the Department of Permitting Services. They'll determine whether or not if there's existing space with access to private property to install an EV charging station on private property. They automatically deny the request. There's a possibility of constructing a new curb cut, driveway, or parking pad to install an EV charging station. That will be explored before they allow an EV charging station to be placed in the right of way. So there has to be absolutely no opportunity for off-street charging unless, you know, and if that's the case, the county will then consider it. They will require a right-of-way permit to install the EV charging station. And they require a hold harmless agreements, and they have design and placement requirements. And there are operational requirements as well. Key to that is the understanding from the applicant that if they install an EV charging station in the right of way, then they cannot exclusively use that space, that it's available for anyone to use, and they cannot claim that on-street parking space as their own. Like I said, I don't necessarily expect we're going to have a plethora of requests for EV charging stations, but we do have one instance, in fact, of a request for a review of our current regulations to determine what options are available for this individual if he does purchase an electric vehicle. Let me see. Tacoma Park has adopted regulations that largely mirror the county's requirements for curbside charging stations. Dave did a little research on the website of Tacoma Park. The city also indicates they'll consider granting permission for a cable on a sidewalk with an approved cover. But their administrative staff says they haven't received any requests for such installations and aren't sure they would actually approve an application. I don't know exactly what that means. And Washington, D.C. allows for level 1, which is a standard home outlet charging cords to be placed on a sidewalk with an approved cover. We haven't researched what DC allows with respect to EV charging stations or the city of Tacoma Park. I don't believe the city of Tacoma Park has ever had a request for one, and I don't know what DC allows based on some of the limited research that Dave performed. But I think the two discrete questions for the council this evening are, do we want to prohibit charging cords and cables and the like across sidewalks? One could argue that our current code does that already, but it's not express, it's sort of implicit. But we would like to change the code to make that an express prohibition against these cords and cables and their attendant covers. And then the second question is, how would the council like to address the prospect of requests for EV charging stations in town rights of way?
Thank you. That's perfect. So I guess we'll start with the first question about the allowance or disallowance of cords across sidewalks. So there's slightly little different thing about there's a right of way, but there isn't a sidewalk there. So that's like question 1A and question 1B. We'll start with that. How do you all, what's your initial thoughts about it? So Joy is making me don't allow it sign. At least that's what I think you're making that sign.
Yeah, I think it's a safety issue. You could have a power surge. I mean, just all kinds of bad things could happen. I just think that we should not allow that.
Even if it's across a right of way that does not have a sidewalk, or just the sidewalk?
We
sign?
should not ever put a pedestrian in a dangerous situation where they could be tripping over a cord. We have people who are visually impaired
Of course.
walking around.
Yeah.
We've got kids. So I think it's too much of a safety hazard. That said, I think it's also,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
not, there are two cases, one where, a person doesn't have a driveway or an adequate driveway where they could get the vehicle on, and two, people who are sharing driveways. And then that means nobody's using the driveway because somebody would be stuck in, somebody would be hemmed in. I think we do need to come up with a solution for those people. I don't know if it makes sense to do we inventory all the properties to find out where those items are, or do we just wait for those requests to come in?
Well, a request has come in. So we need to be able to respond to the resident in particular, but I think Todd was saying like it's less than 1%
Right,
of
it's-
households that
don't
in a
have,
situation where they wouldn't be able to accommodate off-street charging. So it,
Right, and
1,036 homes, that's what we're looking
yeah,
at.
I think we should be able to, we do need to allow that for people if they're making that choice. I have another question, and that is about the Leland of the Lawton Center parking lot.
That we will get to.
Okay.
Yes. The same thing as I think you and I are thinking the same thing. But let me just clarify, Joy, that your opinion is that no allowance of these charging cords across sidewalks, but you're okay if it's a right of way without having a sidewalk on it, meaning not every side of the street has a sidewalk in the town. So if there isn't a sidewalk there, is it okay to use the extension cord from the house? No. Okay, I just want to.
Again, I just don't like it because, somebody could still be walking there. People do walk
Okay,
where.
on the other side.
Yeah,
Just want to clarify.
And I want to add, I agree with Joy. We shouldn't allow them. In addition to the tripping hazards, I mean, what comes to my mind is somebody putting a cord across there that's frayed. And, some innocent person walking by, zap. And then if it rains, you're going to electrocute somebody. So it just doesn't make sense for us to allow
it.
that.
Okay,
It doesn't.
all right.
Yeah.
I first want to start with a general proposition, which is, I think EVs are great. The town should be in a position of supporting ways that people can recharge them. And home recharging is vastly cheaper and far more convenient for everybody. So home recharging, to me, is what we should be supporting. I agree that it has to be done safely, but I think we ought to come up, not just a prohibition, because I agree, we can't have cables on the surface coming across sidewalks, but actually if not a required, at least a recommended way in which homeowners can deal with this. And hopefully people pick up on that. As a practical matter, if anyone's laying out $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for an EV, they can afford to bury the cable that would go out to the street if that's the only place they wish to charge. But I think what we ought to provide is where there's a sidewalk, that there'd be some, agreed upon, cut through the sidewalk with a grate over it, whatever would be the construction result that we would like to see is what we would recommend people adopt. So there's a common standard of what this would look like. I'd like to think it's not a big deal. You can make a cut through the concrete of a sidewalk pretty easily. Maybe it's a few inches wide and it's X inches deep. And I don't know whether you put concrete back over it or great. These are the things you guys could recommend. But my spirit of this in my mind is not, no, you can't do this, but rather, if you do need to charge on street, here is the recommended way to go about doing it and encourage people to follow that protocol. So that's perhaps more tonal.
but are you
Yeah,
you
that was
talk-
second, that was going to be the second question, but
No,
because we
no,
were just
no.
going over the first part to prohibit the use
Cords.
of putting in these extensions across sidewalks, across right away. Then the
That's what
second.
I'm talking about.
Yes.
What did I miss?
No, that's
added
okay.
on.
You added
You
on
added
because we
on
weren't there yet.
to the
We were
chart-
just
to
trying to
the-
answer the first
To
No,
question.
have
I meant, I'm sorry if I said, I was dealing with the cords is what I was talking about. The cords that would have to go under the sidewalk where there's a sidewalk, right? Are we all in that?
We need a
Or-
charging station. You're not going to have just a cord sticking out there. You have to
Right,
have a
yeah.
charging station there at the sidewalk. You can't just put a cord there.
I guess it's a matter, since we have an EV, isn't that simply a matter of how long the cable is?
I think it's an issue of hazardous conditions. If someone leaves a cord in a conduit underneath the sidewalk and it's raining and it's left there unattended, and depending on how long the cord is and whether it's left there, if it's not reeled in, that it could pose a hazard. I would not propose that we allow live electrical cord to be run under a town sidewalk, only in a conduit to be then plugged into a car on the street. I think an EV charging station is the only safe way to do that.
I agree. And we have no way of monitoring what kind of cords people are using. I mean, I know for a fact that people are charging cars from regular household electrical grids right now. It's a lot slower, but you can do it. And so people are using cables that I do not think we would consider to be safe in all conditions, and would, even if they are under a grate or something like that, I think we have to go to charging stations.
Okay, well, fair enough. And I don't think there's a big difference here in view, not wanting cables to go on the sidewalk. I will just observe I wasn't contemplating, charging cords from the house coming out, but thinking that there are options you have options as to where you put the charging station. And there is, if you have a long enough cord from the charging station if the cord that plugs into a charging station to what plugs into your car is long enough, you could potentially have that charging station on the property of the family. And then the cord coming from that, which is not skinny little cord, but the actual cable that you have to have, could go under the sidewalk and go into a car from that. Maybe people don't want to do that, but that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
These
I think it's.
these
Go ahead.
charging stations will be placed in the median area between the curb and the sidewalk. They wouldn't extend across the sidewalk. They would just be a short span of cord to be plugged in directly to the car.
I know what you're referring to, where the physical station is still going to be at the house.
Well, if not at the house, but it could be in their front yard, but it could be on their property.
But
Otherwise, we're pushing
not.
more charging stations onto the right of way than might even be necessary.
The problem with putting them in front yards is that you're effectively then running a cord across likely a sidewalk.
No, not across it. You'd still have to put it underneath the sidewalk.
But you don't want a cord just hanging out like the
Right.
end.
Yeah,
The
Brian,
end of it hanging out at the right of way.
If you're the cord itself is the problem. So, you've got a cord and you
Yeah,
have no
right.
idea.
That's
And
got to be
I
buried.
don't, I'm all for EVs and I'm for ways to find out for people to have them in the town. But I'm not for cords coming from an EV charger across our property. The cord itself could cause so much problems. And those are, when they're coming from those EV charging stations, they're 240 volts. You run the risk of a frayed cord and you're going to fry somebody. So you just don't want to take the risk.
Mhm.
I'm perfectly comfortable with having EV chargers somewhere if the house can accommodate it, if the property can accommodate, having it, on our property, given certain conditions. But having any cords coming across from the property across our right of way, for me, is a non-starter.
You'll have cords one way or another.
No, at the
No, but
charging
this is-
station, you must have it from where it is on the curb
Yeah.
to the car. So
So how
that's,
do you get the power to the charging station?
Oh, they have to run it
That's all
underground.
buried.
So that's buried and underneath the sidewalk.
But that's an underground
The
conduit.
controlled unit.
It's not the conduit, the same kind of cord that you have from your
Steve,
charging station.
I
to your car.
understand that, but
Yeah.
okay.
It's made to go underground.
I think
Those cords are not made to go
I think
underground.
what we're gonna, I think what we're coming to is we'd like for the town staff to explore some options, some standards of what this would look like that does not put us in a situation of liability. That and frankly, these will be, as noted, exceptions to the rule. We want to encourage people to install these stations where they can in their driveways, but we don't want to dissuade those that might have substandard width in driveways or situation with a shared that really, really makes it difficult to do. Then this is another alternative, and put in some standards there. To Joy, to your point, and one thing that I'd like to advocate for is also having them explore a couple of bays here, three bays here that would also offer paid. You would have to pay to charge, and whether or not it is utilized by residents or visitors here to the town or visitors of residents that don't have the capability themselves, like what I saw where it was clearly someone that was visiting. Here's a way to accommodate and have it be maybe a faster one. They would pay for it. And that way, when they're attending a meeting here in town or working out in the rec center or having their children at the playground, they could charge their car a little bit. It wouldn't be a full charge, but just a little bit more. To see if that's even possible as well, to offset what might be I don't know, painful experience, what might be an awkward thing if they're trying to set up something when they have a substandard driveway. I don't want to say substandard, but
Yeah.
a driveway that doesn't accommodate it.
I'm for any alternative that alternatives that have been proven to be effective, like the county's stuff,
Yeah.
that there's on putting charging stations someplace. But it needs to be bounded, and that's the concern. The only concern I've got is that I feel very strongly that it should be on private property. I mean, to the extent that it can be, it needs to be. And I think the county's regs go a long way to essentially saying, you got to show me that you can't, if you can't put a pad on your property, you can't extend your driveway before we even consider putting it into the public right away. So there's got to be that pushback to say, let's get it onto the private property to the extent that we can.
Okay.
Mayor Lane.
Yeah, go ahead.
So to the extent it helps, I know Pepco at one time sought to install some charging stations in the town of Somerset municipal parking lot. So I do know that that's an option. That plan ultimately didn't pan out, but certainly possible. And those would be pay stations, and has done so in other jurisdictions, Salisbury being one of them, as I recall. Something we could certainly look into.
I spoke with the mayor of Kensington about this earlier this week, and they did avail themselves of the Pepco offer. They
okay.
installed 5 Pepco charging stations, kind of separate between their kind of public transportation depot and then, and that's not really a right word, and their town hall. Unfortunately, those stations broke, or I should say, became non-usable very quickly. So while Pepco had received a grant to install those, they didn't like shore up the resources so that if a repair is needed, someone comes out in a timely manner. So Kensington is quite upset about this because they've lost those parking spaces because people aren't using them because they think that, and they're not usable for charging. So if we were to go in that direction as well, we'd have to be really sure that there's a reliable provider for such things. There's a lot of research that still needs to be done on something like that.
I guess
And I've been in contact with the county about this, first with MCDOT, Jeremy Souders, and then with the Department of General Services, and they're applying for grants for a resiliency hub, and they're quite interested in the Lawton Center as one of these hubs. So it might be, in fact, possible to do this. And Greg Ossent, the director of DGS, emailed me separately and said, you know, Lawton Center is often overlooked as a potential site, but we think it meets the criteria, and so we want your help in designating it as a hub as part of this grant project. So I offered our assistance and whatever he needs to potentially, you know, identify the benefits of installing them in the Lawton Center and then actually getting it done. Obviously, it'll be a while, but that's in the works.
Okay.
So I think we're in agreement for now that the ordinance needs to be updated for the sidewalk, the prohibition of any of this. The no way whatsoever can you put an extension cord off over a right of way, whether it has a sidewalk or not. None of that will be allowed. So we can start there and review that in January. In the meantime, I'm hearing let's have the town staff do some more research on what those standards would be, so that we can at least address the question of this particular resident that's come in, and if however long that takes, so we do it right, and then wait to see what you all come back with on that, and then we'll, you know, kind of in parallel figure out what options might be with Lawton, and we'll just continue this discussion.
Sure. I'm fine with that. And I'm accepting your points about the not having the cable itself coming out of the charger go under the sidewalk. I guess there's still perhaps some tonal difference, I suppose. First of all, in the Lawton Center, if we can get charging there that works, that's robust, fine. But I wouldn't even for a moment think that that's a substitute for the charging people want to do at their homes.
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't want us to suggest that to any residents because it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
The other point where I really like us to be thinking about is, well, first of all, I think almost residents are going to really want to have a charging station at their own home. Nobody's going to want it on the street for obvious reasons. One is, unless they lock it, someone else is going to be able to use it. And secondly, they can't always necessarily park there. So I think if someone says that they want to park, they want to put a charging station, they probably have come to a pretty thoughtful conclusion about it. And I would not want the town to put up undue hurdles to prevent that. If they're going to do it in accordance with, you know, some agreed protocol process for us, that assures that the charging station is safe, that the cable is buried, and they want to do it, my feeling is by and large, let them. I mean, that's their decision. I wouldn't say, oh, no, you can't because you haven't, blah, 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 blah. I'm not in that space. I feel, again, people want EVs. We should be accommodating it. If they put in a charging station safely, it's not a big deal to have it on a right of way. And also, I read through the county regulations, and frankly, I found them daunting. I just reading it through, I thought the message was, don't buy an EV if you can't put the charging station in your garage or on your driveway. And I don't think that's the message that we should be conveying. It should be, if you need to have the space on the street, here's the safe way to do it.
That's right.
That's my feeling.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, thanks for all that. The next, I think that's good. I think that I like the proactive approach that we're taking here. Scott Fossler Memorial. Yeah. Barney, whenever you're ready.
Sure. I've had great pleasure of working with Pat Burden, Kathy Strom, and Bridget Hartman, all of whom knew Scott very well. And I reached out to them to ask if they could join me in working on a memorial for Scott. And what I sent around today, with one grammatical error, which our dear town manager was able to catch promptly and tell me about, is the wording that we'd like to recommend that we use for the plaque. And for the sake of the fact that we are recorded, I will read it. Scott Fossler, 1945 to 2022. This path honors our caring neighbor and friend who showed respect, fairness, and civility to all he met. An ardent environmentalist and public servant, Scott was committed to the purpose and enterprise of making democracy work. He embodied the belief that good government is the foundation of strong communities. And note that he was a town resident for 50 years, mayor and council member of our town, member of the Ethics Commission of our town, president and council member of the Montgomery County Council, president of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, president of the National Academy of Public Administration, and president of Nature Forward. And at the bottom, just put our town and the date that we'd be putting this out. So I'd welcome some discussion tonight. First, about wording or how people feel about that or any suggestions. But then I'd like to talk a bit about process and next steps and what we need to do to actually put this in place. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments on the wording or anything?
No, I think that's a really beautiful tribute to the, the contributions that Scott made to the town and really to the county. So I think it's wonderful. Where would the plaque actually be placed? And how? I'm assuming we might plan an event.
Yes, that's what it's going to lead to. But I'm happy to take. Unless there's any other comments on the wording, otherwise.
I had a quick comment on the wording. I didn't understand the order. So he's obviously, he was an accomplished person, but I was trying to understand why the ethics, he was a member, of course, but obviously being a member of the council and the mayor, I was just a little, wasn't sure why that was necessarily included, given all of his accomplishments and then the order of those.
Sure. Well, the reason for the order was basically putting the town activities first. That was all.
Mhm.
And then the county. So we could change it. I mean, I don't think anyone feel terribly strongly, but that was the reason for that.
Okay.
In terms of the Ethics Commission, that actually was a very important role they took. We was not initially there, but we showed the wording to some other people and it came up because Scott was a critical member of the Ethics Commission that ruled at the time on the election, which we call the stealth election, as to whether or not it was appropriate for Fred Cesare's application to be accepted. And Scott ultimately thought very hard about that and came down to the view that it was acceptable. It was a 2-to-1 decision, but it was actually a very important decision. It led to Fred taking a seat. So that was one of those times that the Ethics Commission really had a very important role to play. And so people who remember that importance. And while obviously over time that will fade, I think citing that is evidence that the importance of work is beyond just necessarily being on the county council, but committee work also really matters. And even something as usually mundane as the Ethics Commission also matters. So that's the reason.
Okay.
But we felt that the town work should come first. So that's why we put it there.
That's great. Thank you for that. That's all right.
With that, so that we're okay with the wording? Okay, good. Thank you. It was a lot of very good back and forth among the four of us to work that out. It actually we had so much to say, but to actually boil it down to what we cared about it took a while. In terms of location and timing, first of all, what we're thinking of, and John here is helping us with this, is that we would look to do the additional work and get the plaque created and put together a pedestal over the wintertime. And that we would choose a date sometime either late April or it may well be into May to actually have the commemoration. And we'd like to obviously make it an event that we, as many people from the town can join, but also invite his family to come to. In terms of the where it would be, we had a brief call about that, the four of us today. We're actually going to walk the path on Saturday and try to come back with a recommendation. My feeling, which I think the other three supported, is that we want it in a place that it's as visible as possible. And so in my mind, that probably suggests close to the oval, because if you think about it, people who might be walking on the path from from Denison will see it when they exit. People who want to walk that path up toward Denison will see it when they enter. And it's not, but what also is valuable about having it close to the oval is that people who are only going to use the oval and the green, but not necessarily walk the path, will also see it. So I think it probably gets the largest viewership, if you will, that if it's placed on that side. But having said that, that's completely preliminary and open for all discussion And I'd welcome everyone's thoughts about that. In terms of how it's situated, again, all just very preliminary. I want to talk about this in terms of who we might even want some professional help on this, is in designing a pedestal for it. Roughly speaking, there are, I'll say, three options. One is just to put it on some sort of metal post. Another is to find get a really large boulder and affix it to the boulder. And a third would be kind of a concrete column, which would be faced with the stone that we're using for the walkway. And the key with both, if we're either a boulder or I'll call it a pedestal, would be to put it at an angle where I'll say it sort of rises from 3.5 feet to 4.5 feet, something which puts it well off the ground so that people are not, looking down to see it, but it's going to be right there. I think we do really want to make sure people can read it easily. We don't yet have any views about which of those will turn out to be most cost effective. And we don't yet have a budget, but I felt that I shouldn't come back to the council until I can marry up some idea of what we're getting for the cost. So it's not just an open discussion. But roughly speaking, I think probably the whole thing was going to come somewhere between, I'll say, $4,000 and $10,000. We don't know exactly, but the plaque itself is about 2,500 at the moment at this size. Is that right?
That was with pedestal and post.
But that's just a metal.
Right.
Right. If we do something more elaborate, then that's going to cost some more.
Right.
And we do have to decide whether we would want some professional help in the design or not. So that could be an additional charge also. So there's some things we haven't looked at, but I'm just trying to give some approximate range of what it might be.
So when you say oval, which oval are you referring to? Is it the
green, the lawn area? That's where the path comes out.
Okay, let me ask it a different way. I'm still unclear which
Sure,
you're
that's all right.
referring to. So there's the oval, it's a circle that connects the end of the Dennison Garden walkway to what is the next pathway.
That's the Fosler pathway, right?
Yeah, so that was my second question, where the pathway is going to be named, but where
Okay, I did not mean that oval.
Okay, all
I'm
right.
sorry for my confusion, but I'm not being clear. I referred to that as the Dennison side of the Fosler path, okay? So that's
Okay.
one possible place you could put it.
Okay,
Another would be somewhere in the middle, or you could put it, I'll call it at the opposite end of the path, which is really, as it comes out of the woods into the broad green oval, the main lawn area.
Oh.
Are you talking towards east-west Highway?
No, not all the way out of east-west, but when you come out of the woods, past out of the neck of the
street, where the street crosswalk.
Okay,
Okay.
that's I have actually, there's an underlying point here. We haven't actually fully defined exactly the length of in my mind anyway, certainly from the Dennison Garden, call it to that curb cut is a Scott Fosler path. Okay.
okay,
All right. And so when I was referring to the oval, so where that comes out is at you're coming out from underneath the pine trees and you're going to be at the very edge of the broad green. Should I call it the green? Is that a better word?
it's going to be near the bike
Yeah, closer
Bike
to the
area where
right,
the
closer to the
bikes-
bike area, right.
close to the bike area. Okay, that's
Great-
helpful.
The
That's
great
helpful.
lawn, the great
The
lawn.
great lawn.
The great
The
lawn,
great
thank you.
lawn.
Okay, so we
That's
have the
good.
great lawn. Okay,
Great
the
lawn.
great
I
lawn.
like that.
All
Okay.
right, so it's the great lawn, not the oval.
Okay,
Sorry, great
okay.
lawn. Anyway, all I'm saying is that if it's at that end, then people who are not only using the path, but also the lawn itself and don't plan to walk on the path would nonetheless also see the monument to him.
Understood.
So I'm just saying that to me, in my mind, is likely to be the place of greatest visibility.
Okay, so we had talked that it was going to be called the Scott Fosler Pathway. How are people going to know that it's the Scott Fosler Pathway? Is there a second designated area or notification?
We haven't discussed that, so I think that's up for the council to review.
Okay.
We could, if we wished, probably put a couple of very small plaques if you wanted to, if you want to
Or-
announce the entrance. of the
Or
event.
is it on top of this playground? Here is the Scott Fossler and here's about Scott Fossler. Because so the Dennison Garden, it's called the Dennison Garden. And then there's a special paragraph underneath that talks about Lee Dennison. I didn't know if there's an opportunity there to say this is the Scott Fossler pathway, who was Scott Fossler.
Well, actually, we could probably just add the word path or pathway. Do we have a preference?
I don't mind what it's called. I just didn't know how people would know that segment would be called the pathway.
Understood. Well,
Or whatever.
we'll
it's gonna
put
be
some
called.
thought to that.
Okay.
But we could obviously just call it the Scott Fossler pathway. And then everything else follows. So.
Yeah. I do feel, given you were talking about materials and all of that, president of Nature Forward, formerly known as the Audubon Society, I do feel that whatever materials are used should honor the sustainable aspects of what Nature Forward stands for.
Mhm.
And so whatever is chosen, I would recommend that thought be given towards the use of materials that are aligned with what was his vision. So it could be very different than what ended up with the Lee Dennison Garden, because that was meant a little bit more, she was about sustainability, but we kind of made it around that. But I think Scott stood more for that. And therefore the materials chosen, might better reflect his legacy in that regard.
Is a stone facing on a pedestal okay? Is that what you would?
Stone facing pedestal. Well, again, at the end of the day, the stone is natural materials, but the
Right.
pedestal may not be.
Well,
So
it'll be concrete underneath it, but I'm not sure that we should.
I'm
be that concerned
just
about it.
just for thought. It would be good. And someone like Bridget, I don't know if Bridget, she's not part of this.
Yes, she is.
Oh, she is. So
Yeah, yeah.
Bridget should totally know, because she and Kathy Strom, and we went over and over all of that. So hopefully that can just be a part of it too. I love the fact that there'll be an event to
Mhm.
not only open this up in terms of here's Zimmerman, we finally did it after 4 years, 6. No, I think it was less than 6, but I like the idea of a party with that. So this is wonderful. I'm really happy for many reasons it's coming to fruition.
Good,
So
good. So we'll work further on that and develop some options and come back to the council and ask for a budget, but probably, if not, I'll aim to do that in January, I think. Fair enough. And then we'd still need some months to get it made and built. And I also think that we could be thinking as well that if it's, a couple of feet off the path, that, we'd want some sort of flower bed or something around it. Native species.
Let's see.
something like that.
Native.
sorry?
Native. I
Native.
said. Native, yes.
All the plantings are going into Zimmerman. They're already going to be native.
Yeah. Great.
All right, good. Thank you.
Thank you. The next update is around Bethesda Market Park, so don't put away your notes just yet there.
No, I'll pull out a different set of
There
notes.
you go.
Just a few updates. One is that we had one of our discussions today with Irene and Todd joined with the other partners. And I guess the good news is that both the developers and the county officials seem quite optimistic. They're very close in finishing their reimbursement agreement. And even though they couldn't promise it would be done for Christmas, and I asked if they could, because that'd be a nice Christmas present for all of us, it sounded like they were working it out and they'll get done by early January. So that is the critical kickoff point, or the enabling point for the real serious work on the site plan preparation. So that is good news. Just taken a long time to get there, but it's good news. And there's also still some work to be done on a draft of the purchase and sale agreement which will be negotiated, but not actually executed until they know the final price of the garage. But it's still important for us to see that so we can model our own agreement. But that's not a condition precedent for the kicking off of the design work. It's the reimbursement agreement, which is the real critical path item. So anyway, that's where that stands. Separately, though, I wanted to take a few minutes to review the memo that I had sent all of you coming out of the Public Services Committee meeting, in which I sent again today, which set out a whole number of the items that we had taken up for discussion at the PSC. And I thought it was a really useful discussion. I felt it was one of those times when getting committee input was really very helpful and informative, and appreciated it. And coming off of this, we brought up today that we'd like to meet with all the parties in January, specifically on traffic issues, so we can look at this holistically. One of the prime concerns that we often feel in dealing with county officials is so quickly they get siloed that they just focus on their one thing. So we know, for example, that they've spent a lot of time thinking about the crossing at Willow and a path that speaks to the point you had once made, Rich, of making sure pedestrians can move easily crossing Willow, getting to the new playground without having to fight traffic on the Capitol Crescent Trail itself. So they've taken up on that. They're on that. That's going to happen. But the point is that that's not the only thing that has to be thought through. So anyway, what we tried to do in this note was to set out all the different traffic-related issues. And I'm not going to go through each one individually with you tonight, but just to highlight a few that are really important for the purposes of this being a public record. What is the focus on how pedestrians are going to cross Willow, making sure that they can do so safely, but separately from the bikes. The need to address the commercial traffic that could be on 47th Street and how that will be handled. A second large cluster of issues surrounds the garage traffic in the Leland Street, Wisconsin intersection. We've already heard from the county, it may be difficult to have 3 lanes, but we at least would want 2 lanes marked very clearly of Leland going westbound to Wisconsin. But there are other issues as well. One that the committee came up with, which I thought made a lot of good sense, was that we really want to encourage people who are going to park to use the Leland Street entrance rather than turning left on Willow and then right over the Warnoff to go into the garage from the north side. Because the less traffic we have on that Warnoff, the better in terms of pedestrian use, feeling of that is theirs. So to encourage the traffic that might be coming southbound on Wisconsin, or even northbound for that matter, to turn onto Leland and then use that southern entrance into the garage, the turn from Wisconsin onto Leland has to be easier. So putting in a signalization light there, and then taking away the prohibition of turning between 4 and 6, so that people could turn on Leland at any time and then turn left into the garage, obviously would reduce the amount of traffic that would turn onto Willow and then into the garage from the north side. So some good points there to be made. And a third one is the idea that we have to pay a lot of attention to the connectivity between the 2 sections of the park. And there'll be a lot of pedestrians crossing. And so the thought there is that the crosswalk between the 2 parts of the park would be close to 46th Street. And essentially, you would have only one wide crosswalk, so that if you were walking on 46, I don't know whether pedestrians would truly do this or not, but they'd be encouraged to shunt a little bit, to use the official crosswalk, but primarily shunt toward Wisconsin. But primarily, we want to make sure that it's a safe crosswalk for the people between the 2 sections of the park. So one thought is that we could diet Leland by 1 car width. It's actually quite wide on the north side at 46 as you're walking toward the current entrance to lot 24. And as Todd has observed, it's probably likely they're going to have to take away those parking spaces anyway. because you can't have pedestrians coming between parked cars and have it be safe. If we're going to do that, let's actually move the whole street, narrow, make the street more narrow, widen the park area a bit, and have a shorter distance for pedestrians to cross. So this is an issue that we'd like to raise with the county as well. And then with an issue that I didn't note on this memo, but I want to make sure that you're all aware of it, is that we really want to pay attention to something which the developers have only mentioned, recently, which is they actually think that some of the delivery trucks will have to use the wharf to get down into the garage to drop things off. We had previously been told that all of the truck traffic would enter off Leland and could take the ramp down, and no truck would ever have to be on the surface, but they're no longer saying that. And so if we want to probe that, first of all, if it's really necessary that the trucks have some access, I think the point is it's maybe difficult to turn around. So some trucks would go down and then come right out on Leland. And I can appreciate that. But if so, then there has to be a careful discussion about the hours of access and that this isn't something that's going to happen all day long. And again, all focused on the point of safety for the pedestrians going between the Farm Women's Market and the park. So that's a broad overview of the issues, but that's what we would like to raise in a general meeting in January, sort of at the front end of the kickoff of the serious work on the site plan. And at Irene's suggestion, we'll be preparing a sort of a annotated agenda for that meeting, which will include a lot of these points.
Got a comment.
Yes.
When I looked through that, I was taken back to the traffic study we did a number of years ago. And one of the main entrances into the town for cut through traffic is Leland. And the reason for that no left turn 4 to 6 was to coincide with our do not enter 4 to 6 onto Leland. So you're now opening that up. And you need to be, I would think the committee needs to be thinking about what do we need to do at the end of the park to continue to constrain cut through traffic. So I think while I think it's wise to create all those lanes on Leland, I don't want it, don't particularly like the idea of it being created so that you got a straight shot onto Leland into the town and you just exacerbate the cut through traffic problem during rush hour.
I realize we're not going to get into details now, but I
Right.
wonder if you could put up like in place of, like, instead of there being no left turn, have say like no through traffic 4 to 6 or something. You can turn, but there's no through traffic.
It's just hard to enforce, but yes, you
No, I
could put a
know,
sign
but-
there.
Whatever
but-
the thought,
Yeah.
I mean, something we just need to think about.
Fair enough.
Not that much harder to enforce.
Right. Thank you for raising that point. It wasn't something that we considered, so I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But help me out here, though. Obviously, northbound traffic on Wisconsin can turn right at Leland.
Right.
And presumably in the evening rush hours, isn't that where most of the traffic is coming from?
No, it's about
There's quite
equal.
a lot going in.
There's quite a lot going.
Coming south?
From NIH.
From NIH,
H.
and, yeah, coming back down. It's about equal. And yeah, so I'm all for opening.
Right.
I mean,
right.
I think there's and I don't see how they think there's not enough room for 3 lanes at Wisconsin and Leland intersection. Because that one, the lane that's over by the beer outlet
Those
is
narrow.
huge.
Oh,
It
sure.
doesn't need to be nearly that wide, and it would accommodate 2 more lanes, 2 lanes on closer to the Donahoe building. So
And it wouldn't need to be lanes per se
Yeah.
from 46 as much as just 3 areas to line up behind at the light. Yeah.
Well, probably more generally say 3 if possible, but if so I can take that. I think the issue about, we talked a bit about that store. The issue is there's a lot of there are parking spots there. So they need to pull out and get back into traffic, and that takes some space. And then, by the way, the only other issue is at the base of, and this is something which the county's already pointed out, there's a big signalization
Oh, yes.
block of a gear that's sitting there that essentially makes it difficult to, without moving it, to make a lane out of that side.
There's electrical boxes and everything else on that corner there.
You mentioned in there about given the potential removal of those parking spots on Willow, that why not extend the sidewalk so that there's less street for people to cross through. I do.
That was a Leland.
Oh, that wasn't Willow.
I was talking about Leland, dieting Leland down.
Okay, but with the removal of the Willow parking spots, were you thinking, I thought you were saying less to cross to go from Bethesda Market Park to Elm Street Park? Maybe I misunderstood.
No, I was referring to the two sections. I'm sorry, I was referring to the two new sections of the park across
Okay,
Leland.
but you wouldn't
That's which
imagine.
is extra wide.
Yes.
Willow is not particularly wide, but the part of Leland, which is just past 46th Street toward
Mhm.
Wisconsin, that is a very wide street.
Mhm.
And that's where I was thinking of it.
Got it. Okay. The reason I thought was because the Tripper bus is going through what they're doing now is they're no longer turning from Wisconsin onto Willow to then take the left to pick up everybody at 47th Street. They're actually going on Leland, taking a left on 46, taking a left
I
on
noticed
Willow and
that.
taking a right onto 47th Street.
Mhm.
So that's why I was thinking if you were narrowing that down, but that's also a problem because they're coming through the town streets, the Tripper bus, and that's not too cool.
I have to, Todd, maybe something you're raising with him, but I have to believe that with the construction of the Capitol Crescent Trail and taking a bit of 47th Street for that, it's hard to imagine they're going to allow the Tripper bus to continue to use that spot anyway for loading. How can they? I mean, passengers waiting to get on the bus will be standing on the Capitol Crescent Trail with bikes going by. I don't think that they permit that.
Yeah.
Maybe something we ought to follow up on, but it strikes me as mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I know there's a mountable curb there for, trucks and other larger vehicles to get through. But yeah, point well taken. Where is the loading zone going to be in relation to the CCT?
Yeah. And particularly with the bus, because of all the passengers waiting, for half an hour before the bus comes.
I
So,
thought I saw on the plan, there was a loading zone they had already planned in there.
a loading zone, but for Papa John's and, the actual delivery vehicles, not for the buses picking up passengers.
Well, I don't know if they're
Yeah.
going to get away with that because initially Tripper bus was picking up on Willow until the bike lane took their spot over and then they turned over. And when we brought it to their attention that the turning radius is not working for the Tripper bus, they're like, oh, the Tripper bus isn't even supposed to be there, but they weren't enforcing that. And now it's established. It's been a couple of years like that. So good luck trying to say that they can't use the loading zone. Anything else on Bethesda? Okay. Any questions about Bethesda Market Park? The next item is the technical amendment to state law to clarify municipal regulatory authority. So the public hearing, for anyone on the line now, the 11 of the 12 municipalities in Montgomery County have regulatory authority for I won't say how to use the land, not so much what to use the land for, but how to use it once that's passed, right? So zoning versus regulatory authority. And what we've done is work with our Montgomery County State Delegation to put forth a local bill, which is PG County and Montgomery County bill, even though it doesn't affect PG County, that effectively ensures that regardless of if there are multifamily buildings within what is a predominantly single-family zone, that each municipality would have the ability, as they do today, to regulate things such as height, setback, water drainage, parking, blah, 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 that we have today. So it's just clarifying all that. The public hearing for that technical amendment occurred this past Monday. There were 4 of us that presented. Delegate Solomon introduced the bill, did a great job in terms of introducing in terms of you may be thinking X that we're, but it's not going that way. You know what I mean? We're just trying to do some clarification and just make sure to avoid litigation. Then I spoke just in terms of that we need this clarified. This will be essential to maintaining compatibility and things like that. And Mayor Furman of Kensington humanized it all. She herself living in a townhouse talked about just, living in Kensington, we have a number of zones, and it's important for setbacks to be there because we have commercial zones and light industrial zones, residential zones, commercial. And then Ron did a great job in giving the history, like why is this important, and talking about the lawsuit that occurred in the 90s at North Chevy Chase and how ultimately that's the initial iteration of this particular law at the state level and how it was updated during mansionization. The questions that we received, there were three main questions. One from Delegate Moon, who basically is like, what is the intent of the municipalities as it relates to multifamily housing? And is there an intention to be more strict in terms of the rules than the county? And Ron pointed out that that's what some municipalities do today. We have, because of just various conditions, we do have in some instances some stricter regulations, but others don't, and following up on that, Mayor Furman talked about the importance of that 10-foot setback, for example, that separates residential from commercial, like that's something that's needed in their community. And Delegate Solomon pointed out that, again, it's written within the technical amendment that if there are municipalities that want to relax certain regulations because the development is multifamily, they're, it's written in there that they're very able to do so. It just can't be more strict. The second question was just listing out the 12 municipalities that this particular legislation would impact. And the third question was about spelling out the zones that this would be. So there's some discussions around that right now to provide that list, that accurate list to the Montgomery County delegation, and make sure everybody's still on the same page. As far as I understand the next process to be is the Montgomery County delegation needs to vote it out. So the specific committee that we had testimony for, and I'm sorry, I'll go back to the two other people who testified in a second, will then decide whether to vote it out. So it goes to a House committee, and then that starts the process in January. The other two people who testified, one was a representative from Greater Washington who it wasn't supporting, it wasn't opposing, it was just basically we have a housing crisis and municipalities need to do all that they can do to make sure that more housing can be constructed. And then there was a representative from the Maryland Builders Association that was basically having different questions about this, clarifications, questions that didn't state them during his testimony, as much as just to say, I will be meeting with Delegate Solomon, which apparently occurred this afternoon, to answer any questions and, just so that I understand what the impact would be for builders. That was basically it. It was kind of over in 15, 20 minutes. Brian, I don't know if you have any more to add about the Monday night hearing.
Maybe just to add on to what you've already said, Mayor Lane, the next step would be for us to work out any issues at the committee level. As the mayor noted, Delegate Palkovich Carr asked for us to come up with a list of what zones we deem predominantly single family for which we would want to retain regulatory authority. And so that's our next task, come up with that list with Delegate Solomon, and then work that issue out and any other issues that come up in committee before the full delegation takes a vote.
On that point, is that any different than what in fact has been proposed to be subject to the ZTA?
So, well, we don't know what's going to be in the ZTA yet. But if you'll remember, we came up with some general language for the bill that would say we can regulate buildings, period, and delete single family. And Delegate Solomon explained that through his discussions with the planning director, Jason Satori, there was a request that single family remain with respect to what zones we're allowed to regulate. Because the explanation was Tacoma Park, having just gone through a master plan amendment, now has some CRT zones that were formerly R60, and the planning department wouldn't want to see the bill give Tacoma Park regulatory authority that they didn't previously have on the new CRT zones. And also going forward, 100 years from now, if R60 becomes industrial, that we'd no longer be able to regulate in the industrial zone that we would become. So it was that concern that led to a last minute edit to the law at Delegate Solomon's suggestion to retain the second instance of single family. So you'll remember the language currently says we can regulate single family buildings or single family houses, buildings, and other structures on land zoned for single family use. So the first single family is deleted in the bill and the second single family was retained. But we asked, given that request that the second instance of single family be retained, can we add predominantly in front of single family? Because predominantly is what is currently used in the county code to describe R60, R90, R40 zones, because we wanted to avoid ambiguity as to what it means to be single family, zoned for single family. That can mean different things to different people. It could mean single family uses are allowed, or it could mean only single family uses are allowed. And so we didn't want to face that ambiguity. So we thought adding predominantly makes sense because it ties it into how the county currently describes our zones.
I guess just keeping it simple. It
Mhm.
would just seem to me that whatever is zoned R60, R90, R100 inside of R11 or 12 municipalities is what we're talking about. I'm not sure that it's more complicated than that. Am I missing something?
So most of the 11 jurisdictions only have R60 or R90.
Right, but I
Tacoma
was making room for Kensington. If they have some portion of their town that they've had redesignated as CRT, that's fine, and that would be carved out. But anything that's R60 or, so I'm not sure that there's any issue. I guess that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I was wondering that too.
Well,
There-
and that's
there's a-
what I think that's what Delegate Palkovich Carr wants to confirm,
Right.
that it is only going to impact the R60, R90, R40 maybe.
Right.
Right.
Any,
No, I'll just add, I thought your testimony went very well, Irene. I listened to a tape and I thought it was a good show.
well, it was easy to just turn over to everyone else after the.
Well, and
prepared-
also I think it was very helpful that there was no clear opposition to it. That was nice.
Correct.
That was good to
That's
note.
Yeah.
about half a
good.
shot. Yeah. Any other questions? So more will be revealed once when we meet again in January. So the next item or last item is the minor master plan amendment. So that public hearing occurred on last Monday on the 2nd of December. And maybe a half a dozen, there were 9 people in total who testified. 6 were in person, 3 were online. It was a mixed bag of folks that were in opposition of eliminating the development cap, and those who were welcoming the lifting of the development cap or elimination of it. I really appreciated the tone that we took at the end because we were actually more aligned with the Implementation Advisory Committee, the IAC, than I had realized. So effectively, you may know that the IAC consists half of developers and half of residents from the surrounding communities, and their tone and ours matched up of, it has to be eliminated. There needs to be more, better reporting. Holistic is the word that we used, and they were more about drilling down and, you know, making sure that there's more transparency with the issues that are cropping up. And others were not as, there was one person who was against the increase of the PIP, representing developers, and wanting to expand the height incentive area, because even if it's just one block over, that's going to make their project pencil out. So the first work session for the planning board will occur tomorrow afternoon, and we'll get a sense there just what I can't right now tell what direction they're going to go in, but I'll let you all know when we listen to that. Probably will be a couple of work sessions, but I don't know. I don't know what they'll be wanting to talk about so long about it. So.
Well, in light of that comment from the developer, I'm sure you'll be mindful of any proposed change in the height incentive area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Any of those. So, and next steps there, once they go through their work sessions and approve the change, the amendment, and then bounce it over to the county council. I think that's all that I have for that. Any questions or?
Done a lot of testifying.
I know.
Thank you.
I feel like I was showing up every week. It's fun though, you know. What the heck? And there was a write-up about the minor master plan amendment and MoCo 360. And thankfully I was just quoted straight out of the testimony, as was Deedon. So at least it was consistent there. And that's all there. Any other points to bring up before we close it out? I want to wish you all.
Oh, sorry. I have one thing to bring up, but the comments, excuse me, the ordinance to amend chapter 4 that you discussed this evening was introduced this evening, but a public hearing can't be held until February. The town charter provides for 6 days between introduction and public hearing, unless it's an emergency, and then that's waived. But state law, because we're modifying building codes, state law requires 30 days notice, and we have to provide notice to the county as well. So we'll be holding that public hearing in February.
Thank you for that clarification.
Can I asked Todd, I noticed one of the things in there that it goes to the county. What if they don't approve it?
Well, that's a good question. If they don't approve it, I don't know the answer to that, because they've never not approved it. Usually it's silence, and we don't hear anything from them.
They don't approve it. They just don't read it.
They don't have a pocket.
That's right. Exactly.
I didn't know they had, and this, I guess Ron's left. I didn't know that they have an override authority.
Just on the building code. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not building code, and they have review authority. I'm not sure they can provide comments, but I'm not certain they have override authority.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just some,
yeah. Too bad Ron's left, but I'm not sure exactly the technicalities there. But I know they have review authority, but I'm not so certain they have override authority.
And I do want to clarify, because I've received a couple of questions from the land use committee meeting that occurred earlier this week. Even when this technical amendment passes, let's all be very positive in thinking that we will still retain the authority to regulate. And if that also means the strengthening of ordinances that would apply to single family homes and multifamily homes, that will be allowed. So the strengthening of ordinances is still there. It just has to be applicable to all residences.
Right.
it can't focus on them all.
That's right.
It can't zero in and say, oh, because you're, different type of resident.
Unless you're going to loosen it, that you can loosen.
You
it.
can loosen it for that, but
You have to loosen it for everyone.
but you would, but you can,
No, you don't.
no,
have
you
to.
don't have to loosen it for everyone. You would
Oh,
loosen
you're
it
right,
straight.
right.
But if you're strengthening it, you're strengthening it across the
Across the
board.
board.
So I just wanted to make sure that, because there was a little bit, also, it doesn't need to be something, because there was another question that came about, meaning kind of regulations are frozen as of a certain date. That's not the case either. It's, we continue as a town, future town councils will have the ability to strengthen or relax ordinances accordingly. So just wanted to make sure everyone on the line was, whoever's listening to this later would understand nothing is frozen in time. It's just a clarification. Great. Well, with that, I wish you all a very happy holidays and everything, safety, health, prosperity for the 2025 and all of you on the line, the masses.
Carlo, thank you. for
Yes,
joining.
Carlo, our newest member of the Public Services Committee is on the
Yes.
line and been very helpful as we've had discussions around Purple Line. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.